The camera market is toxic. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about something that's been on my mind for a long time. The toxicity in the camera market. Every time a new camera is released, especially from brands like Lumix, the conversation quickly turns into a battlefield. The recent launch of the Lumix S1RII has been no different. Some people are praising it, others are tearing it apart, and once again, we're seeing the same cycle of bias, tribalism, and toxicity. So I want to break this down. Why does this keep happening? Why do people get so emotionally invested in these brands? And most importantly, how do we move past this and refocus on what really matters? The craft. Brand favoritism is real. Sony, Canon, and Nikon dominate the market, and there's a pattern where these brands seemingly get a pass where others don't. For example, the GH5S had a 10.2 megapixel sensor and was dismissed as not useful for real photography. But when Sony released the Sony A7S III with a 12 megapixel sensor, suddenly 12 megapixel is completely fine because it's great for social media. Another example, Lumix had the first fully articulating touchscreen on a full-frame camera, as far as I'm aware. But it was barely acknowledged. Sony does it a few years later, and suddenly it's a game changer. So why does this happen? Part of it is simply down to market dominance. More people own Sony, Nikon, and Canon cameras. Therefore, there are more people to champion the really cool features of those cameras. It's as simple as that. But there's also something deeper going on, a mix of psychological biases. There are several biases at play here. Number one, the sunk cost fallacy. If you've invested thousands of pounds or hours into one brand, you want to believe it's the best, and criticism can feel like a personal attack. Number two, tribalism. Humans naturally form groups, and defending your team feels like you're defending yourself. And number three, confirmation bias. You seek out opinions that reinforce what you already believe, whilst dismissing anything that contradicts it. Well, here's where things get tricky. This isn't just about big brands. Smaller brands like Lumix attract passionate users who sometimes overcorrect. If someone critiques a Lumix camera, certain fans will attack that person in droves. And this is simply because, as a Lumix user, it can feel like there is a lot of heat coming from all directions. And that is because they have a smaller market share. It's as simple as that. This cycle of bias and backlash fuels toxicity from both sides. And the real loser in all of this is the craft. I've always believed in this. The craft comes first. Cameras are just tools, and you didn't get into photography or filmmaking because you love cameras. You got into it because you love creating, though I'm sure there are some exceptions out there. Fanaticism, on the other hand, represents a few things. A lack of experience. People assume that owning a certain type of camera will approximate to a certain amount of success. Number two, deep insecurity. Some people attack others simply because they feel threatened. A camera with better specs isn't an attack on your personal choices. And number three, a lack of emotional intelligence. If you can't handle a difference of opinion, that is a reflection of your own critical thinking skills. And number four, weaponizing reviews. Just because a reviewer praises your favorite camera or critiques it doesn't mean you should use it as ammo to bully other people with. That is incredibly childish. And the best way to make a point is simply through your art. Less time fighting online and more time doing. A perfect example of the fallacy of having brand bias is the creator. Now, I'm not picking on Sony here, but this has been very much a talking point, so it's more in the zeitgeist. So the creator, directed by Gareth Edwards, was shot with the Sony FX3, and therefore people often use this as a yardstick for success, or buying a Sony FX3 as an example of how good they are as filmmakers. But this, unfortunately, couldn't be further from the truth. So let's break it down. The creator had a budget of approximately $80 million, but it also featured professional cinema glass, high-end production techniques, crews, scripts, talented actors, The glass alone costs $20,000 per lens. And the takeaway from all this is that the Sony FX3 played a role, but it wasn't the key reason for the film's success. The skill, resources, and artistic vision mattered far more. Owning the same camera won't approximate the same success. Making short films or content with whatever you can get your hands on will get you closer to success stories like The Creator or 28 years later than owning a camera for style points ever will. So stop worrying about what people choose to shoot with. None of this is to say we shouldn't have opinions on cameras. I critique gear all the time, but there's a difference between fair critique and outright hostility. The comment section is a place for people to share their thoughts, including critique. However, my responsibility when commentating should always be to remain courteous and constructive with whatever points I need to make. Similarly, if I've made the video, then I need to be aware that people also have a right to an opinion, and that is completely fine, and that respect goes both ways. And I've been on both ends of that spectrum as well. At the end of the day, no matter what brand you prefer, we all exist as part of a larger community, and we all bear the responsibility for acting civil. We are all capable of slipping from those responsibilities, but we should try to right the train or let things slide. And please stop weaponizing specs and opinions from larger creators. They likely never intended for their videos to become info hazards. If you've made it this far, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you experienced brand bias in the camera world? Have you ever caught yourself falling into one of these psychological traps? Let's have a discussion without the toxicity. And most importantly, go out and create, because that is what really matters. I'll catch you all next time. See ya.